Hello, everybody, and welcome to AI People. Today, we're talking to Saleh, who is CEO at Orra, which is an orchestration layer for making agents reliable. Greetings, Izo.
Hi, Ben. How's it going? Yeah.
Very good. So we always kick off the podcast by asking for some predictions on the AI industry as a whole. So the first one is, how do you see humans and AI collaborating with regard to work in 5 years' time and in 15 years' time?
Wow. Actually, I think in 5 years' time, it's I guess the way to think about it is developer tools are kind of blazing or trailblazing that sort of environment. So if you look at the current state of developer tools for coding in the AI world, I think they're kind of showcasing what other people, like just normal humans who are not coding, can achieve soon. In the way that you're just running the ability to be able to run tasks in the background and have agents work on them autonomously, and then you're just managing the work between multiple sets of tasks that are being completed. So maybe in the next 5 years, that would just be the norm for normal tasks, not just coding tasks. In the next 15 years, I don't know if it's going to be agents. I'm not sure. I think I mean, if LLMs and if AI generally, I mean, not just specifically LLMs, continues, it might be, a different environment altogether. I think being a technologist, I find it hard to look into the future that much. But I think robotics, maybe, things are veering off into the physical world, perhaps. So work might just be automated in a completely different way. You're actually giving maybe a robot certain tasks to do, rather than like a virtual assistant.
So software agents, yeah, okay. And in terms of the AGI question, if you put your own definition on that, do you think it's something that we're close to now, or is it still kind of perennial 10, 20 years away?
These are questions I don't normally think about too much because these all okay. So I think in terms of before you think about AGI, so what are we actually doing right now? We're just predicting the next token, really. That's kind of what we're doing. So if you have massively big models that can predict the next token really well, and you think of that as intelligence, then that's great. But I'm not really sure what AGI will look like, to be honest, in the future. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it's a better LLM or something entirely different. So I think there's a lot of is the transformer model going to scale to be able to realize AGI? Probably not. I think there's some new models coming in.
There's something else.
Yeah,
something else needed. Okay, and last one is where do you think AI will impact kind of wealth inequality? Do you think that's going to kind of increase that, or are we going to narrow gaps in opportunity for people?
Yeah, I think good questions. So I think I'd like to sort of think of it from like when the internet came about, so like ages ago. So a lot of people are caught off guard. Like, what is this internet thing? Why are we using these servers? Or what is e-commerce? All these questions, were kind of asked, and over time, if you kept up, then you did realize wealth early on. If you didn't, things matured, and then you kind of were able to keep up because they were made simpler, right? So then, before, in the beginning, you had to like build like your own server farm to be able to have an e-commerce website. A decade later, you just use a laptop and you're done, and everything's in the cloud. So I think wealth might continue to be it's not evenly distributed now, but like hopefully with if agents are more accessible, or like AI becomes more accessible, it might be slightly evenly distributed. I hope. I'm an optimist. But obviously the inverse can happen as well, and a few people will realize all the wealth because they control the AGI or whatever it is, and everyone else is just a slave or something. But as an optimist, I hope I'm working towards an equal distribution of wealth in the future.
Yeah, okay. So just before we jump into talking about Aura, could you just give us a quick intro to your background? I think you've seen inside a lot of different types of companies and interested in kind of how all those learnings have come together to kind of bring you into the AI startup world.
Yeah, so I've been doing software engineering for a very long time, and yeah, started early days, well, not early, like early 2000s, and worked on internet systems and worked for investment banks and stuff, and then bit by bit started working at places like BBC, but I worked in R&D. So we were using machine learning back then to do interesting things, a lot to do with video. So we were kind of like building sort of archival systems where, like, if you need to search the archive, how would you bring up a piece of video that's required for showing on the news or creating new programs. And that was the first sort of taste of proper like machine learning at scale, because we had a lot of content that we need to deal with. And I started a couple startups back then as well to do with podcasting and just trying to get, it was early days of podcasting. So we're trying to map all that data and offer it to people and help them find interesting things to listen to.
Hmm.
And then in about 2017, I got introduced to deep learning. So I'm doing mostly applied AI. I worked with researchers who back then needed to understand the minutiae of how to build the models and stuff. My job was to scale it, make sure they get all the data. Worked on manufacturing systems where basically we need to do predictive analytics, so that you need to know if a manufacturing line is going to fail or not up like 5 minutes ahead before it fails. And that uses up a lot of data. And yeah, so I kind of saw AI, I guess, growing, from pure machine learning to deep learning to, running deep learning models in the cloud. And that was really expensive. And how do you, stand them up? And then, but it was coupled with things like graphs and, how do all the DevOpsy stuff that in the background that needs to happen to make sure these things also run. Well, MLOps, that's what it's called. So I think when the current state of AI happened, but 2022 or 2023, but essentially I had an existential crisis. It's like, what does this mean?
Yeah.
Because I was very like into this other world of like how
Sort of
like
traditional.
BERT
Yeah.
systems should work and like deep learning models should work. And then someone was like, you just use this API. And it's like those two worlds just didn't marry each other. Like, they didn't fit very well.
Yeah.
So it took a while for me to kind of understand, like, to actually, get into it and just reconfigure my brain to kind of be like, oh, just write a prompt. Okay, right. What kind of prompts are there? Um, so I early on, I was lucky to work in a startup where we were using GPT 3.5 to generate ads, essentially. So your users would come and share the website, and then we had all this sort of all these, they're not agents, but all this prompt chained workflow
Yeah.
that would take your information about you, where you are, what kind of customers you have, and generate these ads that could be served on LinkedIn and Facebook. So that was a really good place to be, actually, because it was early, and then we kind of like saw how everything was changing and growing and made it kind of work. Yeah.
And then
Um,
in terms of Aura, like you've kind of called it the glue layer for multi-agent systems. So what exactly breaks like if you don't have that glue?
so it's I think the way to think about Aura is, I mean, there's a new coin term for it now, luckily, because before it was hard to explain. So it was context engineering done well, essentially. So, as you're running an application or you're running your agents, agents are notoriously so far undeterministic. So things happen in different ways, but they're not preconceived. So you don't know how it's going to end up, or like which agent's going to do the work that you want it to do properly, and if there are any issues, you don't know how to deal with it. So Aura is the glue layer that kind of makes sure that the work that you want done actually gets achieved. And if it didn't get achieved, you understand what happens in that journey that stops it from being achieved, so that you can do something about it. So you can run it in a regulated environment, hopefully. That's our aim. And you can run it in sort of e-commerce environments where money's involved. So you run it in sort of heavy lifting environments where you need to ensure that results are captured, or errors are also captured and dealt with correctly.
And what does kind of unstoppable mean? You know, I've seen you kind of describe kind of what you do for agents, making them unstoppable.
Yeah, as in basically you're kind of monitoring what they're doing and injecting the right context in the flow. In the early days, we looked at something called grounding, so that before your agentic system is sort of, as you're setting up, so that like we have a planner that sits across all the agents that understands what your system can and cannot do, because you've told it, here's my grounding work. Like the system can only, do like e-commerce deals, for example, and it shouldn't be able to do any returns. So if you get a request suddenly that start morphing into, oh, can you get me a return? I just bought this thing or this product, then your agents they don't just go off the rails and say, hey, I'm going to do returns now. They actually the planner sits there and sort of just says, actually, no, I don't have any agents in this system that can do this work, even though technically they can do the work because they're agents and they have access to tools, so they can generally achieve those things. But it's sort of like guards against unnecessary like work that you don't deem as part of your system. That's one aspect of it. The planning is essentially designed to be ahead of time planning. So we generate these execution plans and then we test them using a language called PDL that sort of like models the work and then runs a simulation to see if this work is achievable or not using the agents that you have. And if it doesn't, if you can't achieve those things based on the plan that's generated, then we don't do the work. So that's what unstoppable means in this context.
And if someone's just using OpenAI functions, for example, to kind of handle orchestration, like why do you think that's not enough? Like what are the pitfalls of taking that approach?
What do you mean by OpenAI functions?
Sorry. Well, like if you're just, rather than using an orchestration layer, just trying to kind of use OpenAI to kind of string your agents together, like where are you going to fall down doing that?
I mean, it depends on what kind of system you're building. So you don't necessarily fall down essentially because you are so if you're building a simple system, then you can go with a simple solution, right? So just use the OpenAI functions or OpenAI endpoints to just do the work and have simple orchestration. But if you have a slightly more complicated system where failing has consequences that cannot be simply just dealt with, then you need an orchestrator that sort of helps you achieve targets that you're looking to do to get to. And in the early days, we thought that that's all we're going to do, but work with bigger systems that needed those, that sort of reliability. But actually, the more we build our own internal agents to do things, the more you realize actually, a lot of these things are simple and can work, but actually to make them just work a tiny bit better, we're trying to simplify our glue layer so that it's not so clunky, that it's actually quite simple, that it can just work with smaller systems, let's say, or it's like easily built systems, so that you just get that nice layer of reliability for free without having to work too hard and having to think, oh, I'll productionize later when I have a bigger system.
And what are the most common use cases that you're seeing in the clients that you work with?
I mean, we've got people. It's varied systems. So there's so some of the people that we worked with, they're building DevOps agents. So their job is to ensure that they can do triaging of big systems, with like cloud systems when they break, or so they instead of having engineers, DevOps engineers going into the weeds of everything, you have agents reviewing what's happening in the system, and then ensuring that they can find the root cause of a problem, and for that you need like a lot of planning, and it's a slightly more sophisticated systems, and also rather than just simply triaging, can they actually update the error and make a fix? So those kind of systems are more complicated. They require a lot of audit logs, and they require a lot of the ability to roll back easily. If something's wrong, you want to roll back what you're thinking, or go back to a good state and then start again. Mm-hmm. And they use Orra to kind of do this, but they also use the other tooling. So there are two layers: the agents, Orra, but then there's like within the agent, the work itself could be done with like other sort of deterministic tooling where it says, okay, do X, Y, and Z. If anything goes wrong, roll back. So there's two layers of reliability going on. They like it because of the audit logs, because they get to see, okay, this input came in, they went through there and went through all these chains, and then we got this, and we know how we got there. So that's good. Other systems like e-commerce systems are basically payments, rollbacks, payment gateways failing. That sort of stuff requires also a different level of reliability. It's not as sophisticated as building a complete DevOps agent, where like you have planning at different layers, but it's still a nice agentic workflow. We have customers and consumers chatting with an agent, and then wanting specific work done for them, like buying this or returning that or whatever, and having just a system that says, okay, cool, well, whatever happens, we'll make sure that you can purchase this item, have it sent correctly, ensure the dates are correct, or if anything fails, I don't know, the warehouse doesn't have the item, but a payment's gone out, how do you kind of deal with these things in an agent context? And that's also quite useful.
And have you open source part of the kind of offering that you have?
Oh, so the current offering is completely open source. It's MPL2 licensed, so it's completely open source. So we are going to have a closed source, of like a commercial offering that's kind of uses the core of the open source, but does things a bit differently. And that would be obviously paid for and not open source.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess kind of you're learning a huge amount from the open source tool being out there. Like what are the kind of biggest mistakes that you see people making, like before they come and start talking to you?
I think sometimes there's a lot of things that are so some of the things. There's so many mistakes. Sorry. I think people don't appreciate how much prompts matter when designing agents. Everyone thinks, okay, I've got a quick prompt, it does something, or I have a really big prompt that does something, and then, but in fact, effectively, you need to kind of iterate a lot on your prompts to kind of make sure that they do, like you are achieving what you need to achieve. And sometimes that doesn't just mean developers working on it. It means the business has to have a hand in building these prompts. Because sometimes the prompts are too simplistic, and then because they're not delivering, they get more words added in, and you can actually and sometimes a lot of developers rely a lot on the tooling rather than actually the prompt, which the prompt is like the brain, and you don't appreciate how much it can do for you. It actually does a lot. So that's a big problem, and so a lot of the times it's like, let's just get the prompt right. Your system's fine. Other things are to do with like, relying too much on human in the loop. Be like, okay, everything will just be a human in the loop, where it doesn't really need to. And just from our perspective, we don't affect any of those things. Our only human in the loop are operators, and like on the platform end, that kind of fix things at a high level. But working, like just building workflows that can achieve things, by taking the time to understand the core pieces of the problem. I think that's everyone's really gone home building agents, but they haven't spent time understanding the core concepts. I think mostly that's the problem, really.
Because there's obviously an explosion in kind of the last year or so of the number of kind of agent process automation companies that are now on the market. Do you think we're at a point where people are kind of meaningfully running business process through agents, or are there still kind of layers we need to go through so people are seeing real value from it?
I think from my experience, it's still nothing is really truly in production. It's all just a lot of proof of concepts, a lot of let's just run it with feature flags everywhere to make sure that it is in production, but it's not really in production. So it's just a small subset of users see it. So it's still ways to go, but I think partly as time. So we started last year. Orra was like the third version of the product, and I think we're about to go through another revolution. But it changed dramatically between versions. And when we started Orra, it was September last year, and cost was an issue. So LLM cost was a major issue. And that's one of the reasons a lot of people didn't want to put things in production, because it was expensive. It was like really, really expensive. But then as time went by, things got a lot cheaper. A lot of new tools came in that helped you cache things. LLMs vendors themselves started caching your prompts. Like a lot of work has been done to lower down cost. And then it became reliability is an issue. And then, that's now getting through in the next push. So a lot of, even before you get to Orra, before that you had to do a lot of stuff on your own. And like a lot of AI SDKs and stuff are now getting a lot better at helping you just get this stuff right, because you might be talking to multiple LLMs at once. LM as a judge was an issue. And it's getting better. So everything's getting better, so that like if you talk to an engineering manager in a team where like they can't rely on 91% reliability or 91%. Okay, this is going to work 91% of the time. They need to make sure it works 99% of the time. Not just in like it's operational, but actually it's delivering value to its users. So I think we're moving there. We're getting there. Reasoning models are in. So a lot of stuff has changed. So I think what needed to also change is how people work with this stuff, or how attitudes towards how do we work with this stuff. And I think I kind of alluded to this earlier on, and basically like coding agents are sort of helping people like developers like me who are actually implementing the work and working in these organizations understand, oh, this is how you work with a coding agent, and this is almost the same way you work with a normal agent, because of like there's how do you understand context. Well, I need to serve my context in this place so that it's dealt with. Oh, now I push a pull request somewhere and there's a coding agent that's waiting and reviewing it and giving me issues that I need to resolve. And like I'm now managing processes rather than just hand coding everything by hand. Writing everything by hand. So I think now that that's going in, I think maybe in a few months we'll start thinking, okay, cool. This thing is you have people working in organizations who understand not just the general context, but like how this stuff actually works in day-to-day operations, because they're using it day-to-day, and they can imagine it like pushing products that help customers buy train tickets and I don't know plan actual holidays with Expedia rather than just build these planners. Yeah. So I think it's in the next 6 months to a year, I think we're going to move beyond this simplistic systems to like actual real operations. And
you mentioned before we started talking that you kind of use agents extensively and kind of building Orra like as your own startup. I guess that's the kind of modern world that everybody's talking about, like, as you mentioned, like doing more with less. I mean, has it worked out as you were expecting, or generally, most startups come with a lot of things that people weren't necessarily expecting?
It has. It works out for us in two ways. First of all, we kind of make these assumptions about the platform that we're building, but then it turns out when you build a real system, like a real true system rather than a demo system, like actually some of these things don't matter, or some other things matter that we really need to double down on. And the agents, and actually the agents themselves are actually, they're saving us a ton of time. They're making us do a lot of things. We use it in a lot of lead gen is agentic in our environment. A lot of things have changed so much. Back in the day, like a year ago, not even back in the day, if you needed to do search with an agent, with search tool, you'd have to, first of all, add your search tool yourself, pay a third-party provider, I don't know, talk to Brave or something to be able to get credit to be able to search. And there's all these things that you had to do just to have search in an agent. Now, if I want search in an agent, I just go OpenAI, use your org search, and they're done. It's like 2 lines of code. And not only that, it's actually really good search. So it eliminates a lot of rework and work that you would have to do on your own. So I think research is another thing, research tools and having access to researching agents in the cloud as well. So you can build a lot, and we do a lot internally to be able to do heavy lifting so that 2 people can achieve a lot. Even engineering work, got agents that review code and do stuff, and you're just managing them rather than having to write everything yourself and just leave the really hard stuff for a human to be completely involved in. So it's been good.
And as you kind of scale the company, how do you see that kind of process scaling? Like how many agents can one employee kind of manage, and how much of their day should be managing agents versus kind of focusing on their own tasks? How does that kind of scale up?
I think it's going to be all about managing agents. I think there's going to be a small bit of tasks, but and maybe agents managing agents. So, I'm talking about planning. Planning is was planning. So it's an agent, a planner agent that's managing other agents. So I think it's going to be. Planning is the key, and context is the next thing. So if you have the right context whenever you need it, then the planning could become easier. And then you can do more because agents can work all the time. So, and cost obviously. If things get cheaper, then you can do more. So I definitely think there'll be a future where I'm doing working on the next thing and having offloading a lot of things to a bunch of agents that are doing it in the background and reporting what they're doing as they're doing it. And that's kind of what Orra is really, the reporting layer that's making sure that everything's running, and when it's not, it just stops everything in its tracks. So
great stuff. Well, thank you for coming on today, Izo. If people want to get in touch, what's the best way to reach you? Where do you spend most of your time? LinkedIn or X?
LinkedIn's the best place, yes. I'm always on LinkedIn. Just hit me up, send me a DM or a connection. Happy to chat. Yeah.
Great stuff. Well, thank you for your time, and thank you for everybody watching, and stay tuned for the next episode of AI People coming soon.